What if the night you were mocked by everyone became the night your fate changed, not by magic, but by the most unexpected witness? The rain started like a whisper and turned into a wave, drumming on corrugated zinc roofs and plastic kiosks along the market road. Street bulbs flickered, water pooled into brown mirrors, and people rushed to duck under awnings, clutching their buckets and sacks. In the middle of it, a young woman stood with a rusted tin tray and a cracked Bluetooth speaker that coughed out soft guitar chords. Her name was Amma. Amma wore a faded yellow dress that had given up its brightness after many washings. The hem was stitched by hand, neat even in its poverty. Over one shoulder she carried a cloth bag with a single treasure wrapped inside, her mother's old shawl, indigo, threadbare, but smelling faintly of shea and smoke. It was all she had kept from the time when life was warm. When her mother's heart had once stopped, it stopped without warning, and the family house was divided like bread by relatives who counted only walls, not tears. Amma's father had left to find work and never returned. She was 16 then. Now she was 23 and sang in the rain for coins. She stood by the bus stop kiosk where drivers sometimes lowered their windows to listen, sometimes to laugh. The kiosk owner, a man with short, hawk-like eyes and a gold chain, shook his head as she tuned the guitar she borrowed from the church youth. "Not here," he said. "You scare away customers when you sing like a weeping bird." "I will stand aside," she said. "I will not block your counter." He smirked, the kind of smirk that tests the measure of a person's dignity. "Stand where you like so long as your shadow pays rent." Amma bowed her head and stepped back to the edge of the curb where the rainwater ran around her ankles. Her sandals were soft with age. She breathed in the scent of damp earth and diesel and let her voice out. It was clear. Even in the rain, even with the hiss of tires and the shouts of vendors, her voice skipped like a stone over water and then sank, slow and deep, into everyone within earshot. She did not sing with flashy tricks. She sang simple lines about a stool by the fire, about a bowl of porridge shared by 3 children, about a promise kept on a dry season afternoon. She sang without bitterness, which was perhaps the most surprising thing about her. She did not beg. She offered. A group of young men under a purple umbrella elbowed one another and laughed. One of them recorded her, zooming too close, catching the line of tiredness under her eyes. "Sing for us, Cinderella," one called. "Maybe a prince will stop." Their laughter rose and faded as they walked away. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The window went down just enough to slide out a half-eaten pastry in a paper bag. A woman's jeweled hand held it like something contaminating her nails. "There," the woman said, "for your performance." Amma glanced at the bag. She could already see the soggy edges, the way the pastry had collapsed under the rain. "Thank you," she said quietly. She did not take it. The woman's eyebrows rose. "So proud. You're singing in the street." A man in the front passenger seat leaned toward the driver. "Just drive." The SUV pulled out. A small wave of dirty water sloshed against Amma's shins. She kept singing. Next came a different kind of eyes on her, clean, cold, appraising. A tall man in a navy suit, the fabric too tight over his shoulders, stepped out of a pharmacy with a pack of mint gum and a face already angry. He was early 30s, the new manager of the nearby food court, and he wore his authority like an iron necklace. His name was Felix. He had built a reputation for firing the easiest targets to show the rest who was in charge. He stopped near the kiosk and listened for 3 breaths. He didn't hear the story. He heard a problem. "You," he said, pointing at Amma. "This is private frontage. You're blocking customers. Move, now." "I'm on the curb," Amma said. She was always careful to speak calmly. Calmness did not protect her, but it protected her from herself. "I can step further." "I said move," Felix said, voice rising. He turned to the gathering faces under the kiosk's awning. "Who told you this place is for performances? You think this is a village square? We are not running a charity here." A few people shifted, wanting to watch but not wanting attention. The kiosk owner folded his arms, pleased to see authority settle over the scene like a net. A trotro honked. A boy with a tray of boiled eggs paused, eyes wide. Felix's thrive on audiences. He stepped closer to Amma, rain tapping his shoes. "Are you hard of hearing?" He took the guitar by its neck with 2 fingers, like a snake tail. "If you want music, go to a bar. This is a business zone." He jerked the instrument upward. The old strap snapped. The guitar thumped against Amma's collarbone, jolting her. Pain shot up her neck. Her song cut short like a thread. A small wheeze left her lungs, half sob, half breath stolen. Someone in the crowd hissed. Another laughed nervously. Felix held the guitar out at arm's length and let it drop into a shallow puddle. The splash marked the hem of Amma's dress with a new brown flower. "Pick it up," he said, "and go." She did not bend. She stood straighter, though her hands shook. "Please," she said softly, "it is not mine. The church." "Church?" Felix said, eyes bright the way a boy's eyes brighten when he discovers he can break something and no one will stop him. "I will give it back to your church then, after I explain how you harassed my customers." He put his shiny shoe on the wooden body and pushed until water bubbled up through the sound hole. The thin top creaked. Amma reached out instinctively, then stopped, hands hovering in air. She had learned the hard lesson. Some rescue attempts only create more damage. The kiosk owner cleared his throat, enjoying the spectacle. "Manager, sir," he said, "this girl has been here since afternoon. The rain, and yet she refuses to leave. She thinks her song is law." Felix spread his hands. "You see? Entitlement. People like you want to make the rest of us your audience. Not today." He bent and lifted the wet guitar by the neck again, water dribbling, then swung lightly and smacked it against the kiosk's concrete column. It didn't shatter, it just cracked with a dull sound, like a bone remembering it is mortal. Amma's throat tightened, her fingers curled until the nails bit her palm. She thought of the youth leader's careful way with that guitar, the way he wrapped it in cloth every evening. She thought of how she had promised to return it tonight. Her voice, when it emerged, was a whisper around a stone. "Please, stop." Felix raised the guitar again. A voice from the edge of the rain said, "That's enough." It was not a shout. It did not need to be. Sound carries differently when it is backed by a different kind of will. The faces turned. A man stood under no awning at all, the rain flattening his hair against his forehead and darkening his cheap shirt 3 shades. His trousers were dusty at the hem, and his shoes were scuffed like a man who walks more than he rides. He held a black plastic bag with the word "parts" half rubbed off. His frame was narrow. His face was the kind that blends into bus stations and bank queues. Thin cheeks, a scar near the jawline like a lightly drawn line from a blade or a childhood fall. Only his eyes did not blend. They did not dart with need. They watched. He looked like a mechanic who had lost his job and spent too much time listening. Felix measured him in a heartbeat and dismissed him. "Who are you?" he said, disdain thick. "New security?" The man walked forward, rainwater trickling along his jaw, and stopped near the broken guitar. He didn't look at Felix. He looked at Amma. Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. The question landed like a warm cloth on a shivering hand. Amma shook her head once. "Good," the stranger said. Then he turned to Felix. "You can finish the job and break it, if that makes you feel taller. Then you will write a receipt to the church for the amount it will cost to replace it, market price, not friend's discount, and you will apologize to the lady for putting your shoe where it never belonged." Felix's upper lip lifted. He laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Look at you, drenched like a stray. You think you can tell me what to do? Do you know who I am?" The stranger's eyes dropped to Felix's name badge. "Felix Mensa," he read. "Manager." He looked back up. "Do you know who you are?" The crowd woke a little at that. A driver snorted. Even the kiosk owner's smirk dented. Felix tightened his grip on the guitar. Public challenges were oxygen to his pride. "Take your mouth and go before I call the police," he said. "You want to be hero for this gutter singer? Fine. Pay her fine. Or better, buy her a ticket back to whatever village teaches this level of nuisance." The stranger stepped closer until he was a hand's breadth away. He did not smell of alcohol. He smelled of rain and something clean, like pine soap. "You care about police?" he asked softly. "Do you care about your job, your reputation, the videos already recording you?" He didn't turn to look, but phones had indeed risen like little dark fruits around them. The stranger's voice lowered further. "Leave the guitar, apologize, or carry on and learn something tonight that will cost you more than a broken instrument." The kiosk owner cleared his throat again, more nervously this time. He had noticed the way the stranger held himself, not like a beggar, not like a man pretending to be brave, like a man who knew what the morning would bring and wasn't afraid of it. There is a difference. Felix felt the eyes. He felt the possibility of becoming a story. Rage hit him like a fever. He hauled the guitar back and slammed it against the metal pole. The wood split, a jagged mouth opening. Go to blazes, he hissed, his face bending into something sharp. Both of you. Amma winced. Her hands rose a fraction, then fell. The stranger did not flinch. Felix tossed the broken instrument at Amma's feet. Water splashed, dotted her shins, spotted the indigo memory tucked in her bag. He stepped back, chin lifted, then turned to the crowd as if to collect approval. Show is over. Move. Anyone who wants to sell, sell. Anyone who wants to sing, audition at the... He waved vaguely toward the avenue. The proper place. The crowd did what crowds do. Shifted, pretended to be busy, braced for what might come next. What came next was quiet. The stranger crouched in the rain, picked up the two largest pieces of the guitar and set them gently on the curb, like laying two halves of a broken jar. He reached into his shirt pocket and took out a folded paper. It had softened under the rain but held its shape. He unfolded it and laid it under the instrument like a small, secret table. Then he removed his plastic bag and took out a clean rag. He dabbed water off the cracked wood as if the instrument could feel pity. "Do not touch my property," Felix snapped, but his voice wavered. Something during those few seconds had shifted, a current under the surface not yet visible. The stranger's eyes flicked up to Felix's. He did not blink. "You broke this," he said. "It is not yours." Amma found her voice. "Please," she said, addressed to both men and to the sky. "Let me go. I will take it to the church and explain. There is no need." She cut off when she saw the stranger's jaw go tight for half a breath, the way a person's face changes when they are about to insist on something that matters to them and they have learned to do it gently. "Miss," he said softly. "What is your name?" "Amma." "Amma," he said, rolling at once as if testing the weight of a stone in a sling. "I am Kofi. Give me—" He paused, calculating something only he could see. "Give me 2 days. Can you trust me for 2 days?" Amma blinked rainwater from her lashes. Trust? She had been asked to trust by people who had turned her pockets inside out while smiling. But she had seen two kinds of men, those who take and justify, and those who hold their anger like a cup of hot tea, careful not to spill on others. This stranger held his anger carefully. She nodded, surprised to hear her own voice say, 2 days. Felix made a scoffing sound. 2 days to what? To get a new guitar? Sell your shoes and add your shirt. Kofi stood. He lifted the broken guitar pieces and slid them into his plastic bag with slow care. He did not look away from Felix until the moment his hands were full. Then he turned to Amma. "Do you have a safe place to sleep tonight, Amma?" She hesitated. Safe. Safety to her was not a room. It was a silence inside the room. "I can manage," she said. "Thank you." Kofi nodded as if that was a complete answer. "If anyone troubles you," he said lightly, with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes, "tell them your uncle has come to collect debts." A ripple of laughter went through the onlookers. Smiles bloom like ground flowers when a stranger's quiet wit softens a hard moment. Felix folded his arms and looked away, a king who had been forced to accept a small surrender and hated how the witnesses might tell it later. "Don't come back here," he said to Amma through his teeth. "If I see you tomorrow, you will not sing anywhere in this town again. I will make sure of it." Fear rose like bile in Amma's throat. It was not about the place, it was about the network. Men like Felix made calls that became doors, shutting in different neighborhoods at once. Kofi's head tilted. He studied Felix the way one studies a fire to know if it will spread. "You will not," he said quietly. "You will try, and then you will be very busy handling something else." "What?" Felix sneered. Kofi glanced at the taxi rank where two men leaned on their car bonnets pretending not to watch. He looked at the CCTV camera under the kiosk's awning, the one with a green light that blinked only sometimes. He looked at the left window of the pharmacy where a sign read, "Card facility down, cash only," and at the curious reflection of the kiosk in that glass, a reflection that held not only the people but also the broken guitar and the shoe and the way the rain haloed everyone like smoke. Then he looked back at Felix. "Your lesson." Felix laughed again, but it sounded thinner. Kofi turned to Amma one last time. 2 days, he repeated, cheeks wet, hair plastered, heart busy with an old ache. Sing in the rain if your spirit wants. But tonight, rest. He walked away, the plastic bag swinging softly, the rain making everything blur just enough to feel like a dream. Amma stood where she was until the crowd broke apart and the kiosk owner found something else to scold. She held the folded indigo shawl in her bag like a secret heartbeat. Then she gathered herself and walked to the church's side door, seeking a light that would believe her. What Kofi did not say in that rain, what he could not say without changing the story too suddenly, was that he had not been a mechanic in many years. His shoes were scuffed by choice, his shirt chosen to speak to a certain kind of arrogance without saying a word. He had sat in boardrooms worldwide, tables polished so bright he could see his childhood reflected and try to polish that too. He had been summoned to several countries by people with surnames that moved markets. He had a driver who had been instructed to wait 2 streets away and answer only to unknown numbers. His legal name was Kofi A. Owusu, but his signed name on documents was a string of initials behind a trust as complicated as a fisherman's knots. The world called him many things: entrepreneur, investor, disruptor. The papers chose billionaire because it fit the way headlines count respect. But the number that mattered to him was not the one attached to his assets. It was the number of seconds a voice can change a room before money recognizes it. 2 days earlier, he had been a passenger in a low-key gray sedan with tempered windows, rolling slowly through this same market road. He had told the driver to turn off the music. He was listening. He listened the way a farmer listens for the first tiny rumble of the coming rain in the dry season. He was looking for a voice, not a voice to sign to a label for clicks and claps, a voice that could hold sorrow without swallowing it. A voice he could build a story around that he would not be ashamed to donate to children who sleep with shoes under their pillows in case a call comes for their mother to run with them. He had found it when her song had drifted above frying oil and laughter and land disputes. He had stepped out then, unremarkable, as he preferred to be whenever he wanted to know how a place behaves when it thinks no one is watching. He had stood under an eave and listened to Amma sing about firelight. He had watched a little girl stop and cry for a reason no one understood. He had seen a soft pride in Amma that wasn't vanity. Then the rain had thickened and he had walked away, taking her voice with him like a coin in his pocket to test it when no one could suggest it was a trick. He had returned in the storm when he saw her again and saw how quickly a man could ruin something small and precious because it threatened his illusion of control. He had felt his breath go shallow in his chest in a way that was not from running. He had felt an old grief wake up, stretch, and ask if tonight would be suitable for paying a debt. When his phone vibrated that night in the safe apartment above a pharmacy 2 neighborhoods away, he did not check who was calling. He had set calls to be filtered by his assistant. He liked the quiet of making his own tea. He undressed, dried his hair with a towel kept for that exact purpose. It was old habit. He did not like hairdryers. He looked at the object he had brought home in the plastic bag and laid it on a piece of cloth on the table. The guitar lay in 2 tired halves. He touched the crack like a doctor checking on a patient who will not resent a bad diagnosis but will fight for every option on the list. He had once loved someone who adored quiet instruments, a woman whose laugh was bright but never loud. She had worked at a small community school where children left their shoes at the door and took their problems off with them for a few hours. A man had come to that school with authority and contempt and had done publicly what small men do when they think their power is an armor against consequences. He had taken what was not his. Shame went around the room like a smell. Kofi had come late that day. He had found her sitting on the steps after the man left, not crying, just watching ants work with a concentration that would have been funny if not for the way her fists opened and closed as if remembering a door handle, as if the door might open after all. She had gotten sick later, silently, the way strong people do when their body decides it need not be as brave as their soul. He had paid the hospital. He had been by her bed when her breath fell asleep. He had built 3 schools afterward in neighborhoods with names most philanthropists mispronounced. He had fired a director who thought his title allowed him to speak through the women who carried the programs. None of it had fixed the twist in his chest that was named too late. Rain on the city outside made the glass pane hum. Kofi called someone then. A man who had been a journalist before his boss had asked him to sign a piece that cut truth into decorative shapes for a minister's son to hang on the wall. The man picked up on the second ring. "I thought you were in Geneva," he said. "I was," Kofi said. "I am in town now." "What kind of town problem requires my old skills?" The journalist sounded amused. He had grown his garden and learned to laugh again after quitting the paper. He worked on contracts sometimes and called Kofi brother in a way that meant loyalty without asking what it would cost. "The kind that needs a camera," Kofi said, looking at the CCTV camera he had noticed under the kiosk, "and a call to a church youth leader to ask about a broken guitar." "Which church? Which guitar?" Kofi told him the name of the street, the kiosk, the voice. He described Felix, his shoe on the instrument. He gave a thin smile when he heard the journalist suck air. "Bring your good coffee," the man said. "We will not sleep tonight." In the morning, Felix shaved with fast strokes, nicking his jaw and swearing mildly when a spot of red brightened his sink. He felt good. He had slept poorly. His mind had replayed the stranger's eyes over and over, but he had risen as determined as a rooster at dawn. He wired a message to the mall's group chat about the need for uniform standards. He lined up 2 staff for warnings. He sent a text to a small bar 3 streets away where the owner owed him a favor. "Street singer coming your way. Do not let her in. I will find you a real act." The bar owner replied with 2 thumbs up and a promise. Felix smiled at his reflection. When Felix arrived at the food court, a woman from Human Resources was waiting with a clipboard. "Morning," she said. "Quick note. The regional director wants your weekly numbers by noon." "They will be on his desk," Felix said. "Today we cut our losses. Too many hangers-on. Too much noise." The HR woman nodded vaguely. She looked at his cheek. "You are bleeding." He clamped a tissue to his jaw and waved her away. "Bring the first 2 staff on my list," he said. "Time to set examples." At 10, a man in a gray suit he didn't recognize entered the food court and walked the perimeter leisurely. He looked like a health inspector with a good breakfast in his stomach. He spoke to 2 vendors. He looked up at the ceiling's unblinking eyes and down at the freshly mopped tiles. He left without shaking anyone's hand. Felix's chest tightened. He texted the mall administrator. "Are we expecting inspectors?" The reply came too fast. "No." At 11, the black SUV from the night before appeared again. The jeweled handlady walked in with 2 friends, all perfume and laughter. They ordered smoothies and sat where the airflow lifted their hair like a soft breeze. Felix made a point to greet them. He liked being seen with them. It made him feel like a man the world consulted before deciding when to smile. At noon, his phone buzzed with a number not in his contacts. He answered because the day had started to itch under his skin. "Yes?" "Manager Mensah?" The voice was smooth and official. "This is Emmanuel from City Licenses. We have received several reports concerning trading practices under your jurisdiction. We require you at our office at 3 o'clock to clarify some matters." Felix frowned deep enough to dent his forehead. "Trading practices? What?" "Failure to display correct permits," the voice continued, professional and bored. "Also a question regarding use of public frontage for private security actions leading to property damage." "What?" Felix said, voice rising. "Who?" 3 o'clock, Emmanuel said, and ended the call. Felix felt heat creep up his neck. He texted again. He called the mall administrator who didn't pick up. He paced past the smoothie table, unaware that the jeweled handlady was watching him with that particular delight of people who enjoy someone else's discomfort more than their own refreshment. At 12:30, the gray-suited man returned with 2 others and a laptop. They requested access to CCTV footage from the kiosk corner, citing an investigation. The kiosk owner tried to bluster and then deflated like a windsock when the men produced badges and spoke his full name, including the middle one he had not told them. He unlocked the back room and rolled out a chair and watched as the men clicked, fast-forwarded, rewound, captured, and saved. He watched the scene from the previous evening play on the small screen. The rain, the singing woman, the manager's face large and unkind, the shoe, the crack. He swallowed. At 1, a link began to spread in a slow ripple through group chats. It wasn't a provocative title. It was just a clear video, sound level adjusted, faces visible but not humiliated by ugly angles. It showed what happened as if the rain itself had recorded a confession and had decided to testify. There was no voiceover shouting truth. The truth was plain enough. Felix's phone began to spit messages. "Bro, what's this? Is that you? Manager, explain." "Not a good look. You are trending on the university student page. Congratulations." At 1:30, Felix called 2 different numbers and told 2 different stories, adjusting small details like a child rearranging pebbles. He spoke of safety. He spoke of business rules. He painted the singer as aggressive. He did not mention the shoe. He did not mention the sound a guitar makes when it meets metal like that. At 2, the mall's regional director called. He did not ask for numbers. He asked for Felix's presence in his office at 4. The tone was the tone a headmaster uses when he finds a match under a desk. At 2:15, the journalist who had edited the video and posted it under a simple headline drank his second cup of coffee and smiled at the comments piling under the clip. Not the loud ones, the soft ones, the ones from older women who wrote, "Shame will find him," the ones from young men who wrote, "This could be my sister," the ones from musicians who wrote, "That guitar looks like the one we use at youth service, please tell me who will repair it." He replied to some with a thumbs up and to one with a private message that read, "Bring your guitar to this address tonight at 7. There is someone I want you to meet." At 3, Kofi walked into the city licenses office and sat on a bench next to a tilting ficus plant. He looked at the posters on the wall, the ones that showed smiling citizens handing over neat forms with the headline, "We serve you." He listened as Felix in the next room raised his voice, then lowered it, then raised it again. He watched a fly do loops in the room and land on a corner of the poster where the glue had dried out and formed a small hill. He thought of Amma walking with the broken guitar pieces to the church. He could see her face when she would say she had trusted a stranger. He could see the youth leader's sigh turning to surprise when he looked into Kofi's eyes and did not find the easy greed of a man seeking to pay off a guilt cheaply for a favor of publicity. At 3:20, Felix stormed out, his face a shade darker with anger, his shirt sticking to his back at the belt line. He saw Kofi and stopped the way a dog stops at the edge of unfamiliar scent. "You," he said, voice like gravel dragged across tile. "You did this." Kofi looked up at him, calm as a bowl filled to the brim but not spilling. "Your actions did this," he said. "All I did was not look away." Felix's nostrils flared. "Do you think you can come to my place and ruin me? You think you are a man? Do you have any idea who I can call?" "I know," Kofi said. "That is why I chose this method instead." They stared at each other, 2 men in the same storm but different boats. Felix leaned in close enough for Kofi to feel the heat of his breath. "Say your name," he hissed, "so I know where to send fire." Kofi smiled a little, the kind of smile that says, "Not today." He stood. He was taller than he had seemed in the rain. "My name," he said, "is not going to change what comes for you if you do not change who you are." He brushed a raindrop off his sleeve that wasn't there. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. These are not your worst appointments today. Felix jerked his head back like someone stung by an insect he thought was a pet. He opened his mouth, shut it, and then walked away fast as if the corridor had turned into a path through nettles. At 5 minutes to 7, Amma stood outside a small workshop down a lane lined with mango trees. The sign above the workshop read, "Kwame and Sons, Instruments." The Sons had been painted later, slightly crooked. A golden light spilled onto the wet ground, and the smell of wood glue and lemon oil drifted out. Voices came from inside, low and warm. She clutched her mother's indigo shawl. The youth leader had insisted on coming with her. He was a good man, cautious and kind, with worry always a half-step behind his jokes. He had said, "Maybe they will fix it. If not, we will find a way." He had squeezed her shoulder once and then let go, because he understood the difference between comfort and crowding. Inside, an older man with white hair and a halo inspected the broken guitar with a magnifying lens and a love that made the instrument look privileged to be broken in his hands. Next to him stood a younger woman with plaits pulled into a bun, her fingers stained with varnish, and a boy of about 12 who watched everything as if he were memorizing the workshop in case it ever disappeared. Kofi stood by the far bench, on which lay not 1 but 3 cases. He wore a different shirt, clean and pressed but still simple. He held a small notebook and a pen. He looked up when Amma entered, and his face softened in a way that threatened to break something in her throat she had kept steady all day. "You came," he said. Amma nodded, unable to speak without her voice wobbling. The luthier, Kwame himself, cleared his throat. "This one can be saved," he said, patting the cracked guitar, "but you will not want to wait the weeks it needs to heal properly." He tilted his head toward the 3 cases. "So your friend has brought temporary friends." Kofi gestured to the cases. "Open," he said. The youth leader did the honors, fingers trembling like they were unwrapping a newborn. The first case opened to reveal a modest but lovingly made classical guitar, the kind that plays soft bossa nova at dusk. The second opened to a steel string with a little sparkle in its wood. The third contained a small, bright instrument that made the boy inhale sharply. "Ukulele." Amma's eyes widened. The instruments looked like strangers who had been told to come and live in her room and had not yet asked what she ate for breakfast. She reached out and stopped, the hovering again, the hesitation of a person who has been punished for touching anything that seemed too nice for them. The young woman with the varnish-stained fingers smiled and lifted the steel string gently, placing it in Amma's hands with a brief nod that said, "This belongs with you for now." Amma cradled it like a child. Kofi cleared his throat. "We could end here," he said, "but I would like us to begin." He looked at the youth leader. "Sir, your choir. How many singers who have voices that make rooms think twice?" The youth leader blinked. "Many," he said, "but voices need bread." "Bread we can provide," Kofi said. He opened his small notebook to a page where lines were already written in neat, careful handwriting. "I would like to sponsor a series of recordings, nothing flashy, simple songs, stories in them. They will live online. We will build a small channel for them. The revenue will go to the church's feeding program and to the musicians who perform. We will sign simple contracts. We will own nothing but the right to post. If any singer wishes to step away, they can do so without fine or shame. The only condition is respect." The luthier chuckled. "Respect is cheaper than some men think," he said, "if they only tried it sooner." Kofi looked at Amma. "And for you," he said, "there is another path in addition to this. I manage another small fund that supports community schools with arts programs. Your voice can anchor a campaign, not with tears for effect, but with a steady truth. If you agree, you will front the campaign for 3 months. You will be paid. You will choose the stories we highlight. We will not dress you like someone you are not. We will shoot simply. We will let your voice do the heavy lifting it already knows how to do." Amma closed her eyes, and behind the lids, she saw not herself on a stage under harsh lights, but a square of sunlight on a classroom floor, and a girl tracing letters in chalk, with her tongue between her teeth without realizing she was doing it. She opened her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Then, louder. "Yes." "Good," Kofi said, and he was steady, but in the middle of his chest something loosened, and a pain he lived with lost one of its barbs. "There is one more thing." The door opened then. The journalist ducked his head through, carrying a tripod. Behind him, a small string of figures lined up, 3 kids from the church youth with eyes like sugar cane and elbows jutting like questions. A woman with a face that had been through many wars and still decided to be gentle, and last, an old man in a shirt with ironed collars and a stubborn chin. Amma's eyes widened further. This last one she knew. He had been the kiosk owner's father once, then the kiosk owner, then the man who taught the present kiosk owner to count money faster than morals. He had retired and learned how to sit on a stool and pass comments like sweet peanuts. He had also, when no one saw, put a cup of hot porridge into the hands of any child who stood too long without lunch near his door. He nodded at Amma. "Girl," he said, in the gruff tone old men use when they need to hide their kindness from their own sons. "Sing one for those who forgot they were poor once." She smiled despite the knot in her stomach. She placed her fingers on the new guitar's strings. She played a chord that sounded like a window opening on a hot room. They recorded one simple song. No makeup. No hairlights, no script, just a voice telling a story about a girl who learned to move her feet to the drum of rain so that when she waited, it did not feel like waiting. It felt like dancing in place. That night, the video went out through the same unseen channels that had carried the video of the broken guitar. It did not go as fast, but it went far. It found people who had cried alone and people who had promised themselves something in front of a sink full of dishes and not told anyone. It found an auntie in London who sent £50 and a note that read, "To the girl with the rain in her voice." It found a man in the north who wrote, "I have no money, but I have a spare drum. Can someone pick it up?" It found Amma's father, somewhere far, older, thinner, eyes red with old dust, who watched in a dim room and put his head in his hands and said without sound, "Forgive me." The next morning, the mall's regional director suspended Felix pending formal reviews. It was done with a heavy tone and many words that mean, "You have embarrassed us." Felix walked out with his shoulders set like planks. He had spent the night writing a statement, deleting it, writing another, and sending none. He had looked up Kofi's name and found only generic things. He had asked a friend in the logistics business, and the friend had whistled and said, "Leave that one. That one is connected sideways." Felix hated the feeling of being told not to fight. He hated the idea that the man in the rain had been someone he could not push without pushing into something larger than his office. He calmed himself with a plan. He knew how to change public conversation. He had a cousin who could assemble 10 accounts to comment the same line under a video until it became the song people hummed without knowing why. He would paint the singer as ungrateful. He would paint the stranger as manipulator. Men like him did not lose. They repositioned. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his cousin. He did not send it. A new message slid onto his screen. It was a photograph, a still of him with his shoe on the guitar. The angle was unforgiving. The caption under it read, "Public cruelty is still cruelty. Be careful. The one you trample may be the one who tells the story about you." Felix's thumb hovered. He had no idea who sent it. The number was unknown. He felt a sensation in his stomach that was not anger. It was old and raw. It tasted like the day a school principal had made him stand in front of a whole assembly and repeat his full name after being accused, wrongly, of stealing exam papers. He had not stolen them. He had learned a lesson that day. Power is in public. He had vowed never to be on the receiving end again. He stared at the photo and felt something else move in him. Not repentance, not yet. Something that sounded like a warning bell rung by a hand he could not see. He typed to his cousin, "Wait." Amma's days changed quickly. She did not return to the bus stop. She did not have to. But she went there once, 2 afternoons later, with the youth leader and the luthier's apprentice, carrying the mended guitar wrapped in cloth. She stood across the street under a jacaranda tree and watched the kiosk owner argue with a supplier over crates. She watched a young boy wipe the counter carefully. She watched a woman with a baby on her back buy a packet of biscuits and break it in half for the 2 children who had been hovering. She watched without bitterness. Then she crossed and went to the church instead, where the youth were rehearsing something new that had her voice lift and fold into theirs like palm leaves on an old roof. She kept her mother's shawl. She wore it sometimes when the air was too heavy. She folded it and placed it on her lap whenever she recorded. It wasn't superstition. It was a way of telling herself, "You come from hands that were gentle even when they were tired." Kofi kept watching, but from a careful distance. He met Amma twice more formally, to sign things, to explain the language of contracts in slow words, to ensure she understood that a signature was not a trap. He sat across tables with her and listened to her say yes and no plainly. He felt the old grief in him begin to take on a new shape. It did not become smaller, but it lost the part that made breathing feel like a chore. The second time they met, Amma asked, "Why did you help me?" She raised her eyes and did not let them slide away. It was not flirtation. It was a person seeking the texture of a truth they were being asked to trust. Kofi looked down at his hands, at the small scar near his thumb where he had slipped on a knife as a boy cutting cassava. He inhaled. "Once," he said, "someone I loved asked for help and I arrived late. I decided after that if my feet knew a way to run faster for the next person, they would run." "No one could have known it would rain yesterday," Amma said. "I heard you sing 2 days before," Kofi confessed. "I was there. I did nothing because I thought, let me listen again before I interrupt. I am learning to be slower with some things, faster with others. I am still failing at it." Amma's mouth curved a little. You don't look like someone who fails. I look like someone who can afford to hide his failures, Kofi said softly. That is not the same thing. They sat in silence for a moment, wearing the honesty like a new shirt that needed to soften on their shoulders. Then Amma said, "Thank you." "I am not a saint, Amma," Kofi added, eyes holding hers a shade stronger than before. "I am an investor. I invest in businesses, in projects, and sometimes in people. My returns are not always money. Sometimes they are peace. Sometimes they are the sound of a child not going to bed with a stone in his stomach. Sometimes they are small. Sometimes they are like a dam broken in the head of a man who thought he was right to be cruel just because it was public." Amma laughed, small and surprised. She had expected grand words. She had gotten something better, something not trying to be bigger than it had a right to be. 2 weeks later, the youth channel posted its 4th video. The views were steady, not wild. The comment sections were cleaner than most corners of the internet. The link to the school fund sat under every video. The fund grew slowly, like a plant that refuses to be bullied by sunlight. That same week, Felix received a letter with a stamp from a lawyer with a name more expensive than his rent. The letter was concise. It invited him to a mediated settlement with the church for property damage and public humiliation. It contained a number. It contained a clause about an apology to be posted on the same channel where the video had been seen. It contained something else, a paragraph that made his throat tighten. "We encourage our client to forgive as you learn. We encourage you to commit to funding the youth's instrument maintenance for 1 year. Not as punishment, but as practice in returning value to the place where you took it." Felix stared at it for a long time. He thought about fighting. He thought about the cost. He thought about the day he had felt so large that a shoe on a guitar made him feel bigger. He thought about the photo that had arrived without a name. He thought about the uneasy sleep that had not visited him right since. Then he called the number on the letter. The apology video came out 3 days later. It was not an elegant piece of filmmaking. It did not attempt to redirect the narrative. Felix stood in front of the kiosk. He looked straight at the lens. He did not blame rain or rules. He said, "I acted without respect. It was wrong. I am sorry." He paused, eyes flicking to the left for a fraction, then back. He added, "I will pay for the instrument I damaged. I will support the youth program for 1 year. If you see me fail at this, remind me." The comments were not kind. They were not savage either. They were watchful. A woman wrote, "We will remind you." A young man wrote, "Start by greeting everyone you step past." Felix did not reply, but he greeted people more since then. It did not make him kind overnight. Kindness does not sprout on command, but a small habit is still a path if you keep your feet on it. 1 month later, Amma stood on a small stage in a community center, painted cream on the outside and hope on the inside. It was not a grand hall. The ceiling fans made the air behave. The audience was parents, children, aunties, a few teachers, and one man in a simple shirt who sat in the back row with his private driver pretending to be bored by the door. Kofi did not sit in front. He did not wave for recognition. He unwrapped a candy and tucked the wrapper into his pocket so he would not litter. Amma's dress was still simple, the color now a deeper yellow. She had sewn the new hem with the luthier's apprentice's help. She wore the indigo shawl around her shoulders like a story nobody could steal. She held the mended guitar, the crack now a seam stronger than before. She sang a new song, written with old words and a strong spine. When the last note settled, wiping its feet before entering the silence, the room stood. Not because a star had appeared, because their own best selves had been mirrored back to them for 3 minutes, and they recognized themselves and liked the view. After the program, a little girl with a missing front tooth tugged on Amma's shawl. "Sister," she said, "your voice is like rain on zinc roof. It makes me sleep and wake up at the same time." Amma laughed and squatted to be eye level. "What is your name?" "Efua," she said, proud as a soldier. "You will sing too," Amma said. "I don't know how," Efua said, half whine, half confession. "You know already," Amma said. "You use it when you ask for water at night. Ask like that on a melody." Efua grinned, the gap like a promise. Across the room, Kofi stood near a table with plastic cups of hibiscus drink. A man he didn't know came up and said, "I know you." Kofi's face prepared to deny politely, then relaxed when the man added, "You were the one in the rain." "Many of us were in the rain," Kofi said. The man nodded. "But some of us were dry in our hearts." Kofi smiled and accepted the compliment without letting it build a throne inside him. On his way out, his phone buzzed with a message from a number that had once been tattooed on his afternoons, a name he hadn't seen in years, a cousin of the woman he had loved. The message read, "I watched the channel you sent. You stayed steady. She would like that." He stood by the mango tree outside and breathed in, slow. The road glowed with headlights. Somewhere, thunder muttered about another evening's plan. He closed his eyes and said a quiet thanks. He wasn't sure where to direct. He put his hand on the tree's rough bark and felt the old world and the new one press palms. Weeks passed. Amma's calendar filled in ways that did not choke her. She said yes to invitations that smelled like purpose and no to the ones that smelled like flash powder. She learned to pause between phrases when recording so the editor could breathe. She learned to take care of her voice like a farmer learns to care for his hoe. She learned that saying, "I do not know yet," is sometimes the wisest lyric. One late afternoon, while sorting donated notebooks in the school storeroom, she found a cardboard file at the back of a shelf. The corner was torn. It contained papers with old dates, creases like dry riverbeds. On the top, a photocopy of a form with her mother's name typed in bold. Her stomach dipped. She placed the papers on a crate and began to read. It was a scholarship application from many years ago, written in a hurry in a neat, hopeful hand. The program had required a sponsor. The sponsor name, written carefully in blue ink, was one she did not recognize. The address was an old address near the bus station. The application had been approved, paid for. There was a marginal note thanking the sponsor for covering the full 3 terms in advance, as per your insistence, for the applicant's daughter, Amma. Amma sat down on the crate because her knees suggested it. She read it again. The year matched the year her mother had bought the indigo shawl from a traveling textile trader and had hugged it laughing because she had said, "Your school is ahead for a while. This is my joy today." She had never told Amma the source. It had not been the father. He had already been absent. At the bottom of the file was a receipt. The signature was the neat, careful initials of someone who did not want to be known by their full name. Amma traced them with her finger. The letters formed a shape that pulled her mind toward a familiar tilt. It could be... No, it could not be. She stood, the file in hand, and walked out into the corridor where the late sun stretched like a lazy cat. She found the youth leader and held out the paper. "Do you know this name?" He squinted. This was the old trust that funded several older kids back then. The manager was... He frowned. "What is his name?" "Owusu, yes. A young man then, skinny." He refused thanks. He said the money was not from him, it was a return. He did it for 2 years and disappeared. Life took him, I suppose. He handed the paper back. "Why?" Amma pressed her lips together to keep them from shaking. She saw Kofi's face in the rain, the way he had chosen words like small knives when speaking to Felix. She saw his hands on the broken wood, like a doctor who doesn't look away when the blood comes. She saw the careful way he had arranged things without asking for a seat on the stage. She held the paper tight enough to wrinkle it, and then smoothed it, the way you smooth the corner of a bedsheet when you are angry and need to make something neat. That evening, they had planned a small dinner to thank volunteers. Kofi was on the list. He had said he would come late after a call with people in a different time zone. Amma waited near the door, the paper tucked under the shawl, her heart a drum with no song over it. He arrived quietly, the way he always did, and he would have walked straight to the back row. Amma stepped into his path. "Hello," she said. Her voice wanted to run, but she kept it walking. "Hello," he said, and smiled in a way that told her his day had been full of other people's demands, but this moment felt like water. She held up the paper. "Is this yours?" He looked. His face did not change. It softened, then became still again. "Where did you find it?" he asked. "In the storeroom," she said, "in a file that had dust to spare." He took a breath. "Yes," he said. "It is mine." "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, and it came out without accusation. It was a simple question an honest person asks when they find a note under a pillow. Kofi's eyes went to the window. The light there held the shapes of leaves on bars, like a pattern a tailor might want to learn. Because, he said slowly, I did not connect the lines yet. When your mother's name appeared in my head this afternoon for no good reason, I thought it was memory mischief. I did not know you had found this. But you did this, Amma said. Yes, he said. Years ago, when I tried to build a memory that would fight the other memory. It was, he searched for the word that would not be dramatic. Practice. She held the paper between them. You have been practicing for me longer than I knew, she said, half a laugh, half a sob. He shook his head. No. For anyone who came after her. If it had been someone else's daughter, it would still be true. He looked at her then, long enough that both of them wanted to look away and did not. But I am grateful it is you. Amma sensed a door that could open. She sensed another door that could stay respectfully shut. She chose to let the possibility sit between them, like a visitor who had arrived early and didn't mind waiting politely on the veranda. Thank you, she said, and it carried weight for many rooms. They went inside together, not touching, not avoiding, the paper folded carefully back into her bag like a story that would be told later or never, depending on what kind of future stepped up to carry it. Months later, a letter arrived that had no whistle, no drama, just a letter. It was from a rural district stating that a small plot of land had been donated anonymously to build a community center and schoolroom, with a note that read, "For voices that must not sing only in the rain." The committee had traced the donor, politely, efficiently. The signature again was only initials. The envelope had been slipped under Amma's door by the youth leader with a wink. At the bottom of the letter was a line. We would like Miss Amma to open the first song on the first day. Amma stared at it and felt the warmth of that first rain without the cold that had sat in it. She went outside and lifted her face to the sky. The dry season had begun. The air smelled of dust, not damp. It did not matter. She could hear the drum under every season now. The night before the opening, Felix met Amma on the street by accident. He had taken to walking more. He had lost his position, then found a job in a smaller company where his orders were measured more by results than by fear. He had learned to say, "I am sorry," without feeling it knock something down in his chest. He had learned to ask his mother how she was without checking his phone while she answered. He had a long way to go, but he had begun. He stopped, surprise flickering and then a kind of acceptance. He nodded. I saw the announcement, he said. Congratulations. Thank you, Amma said. She did not add more. She did not owe him warmth. She owed him safety, and she gave that by not humiliating him with a speech. That, too, is a gift. He looked at the ground, then back up. I am paying for 4 children's school fees this term, he said, awkward, like someone learning a new instrument and hitting the wrong strings often. Amma smiled small. Good, she said. Make it 5 when you can. He nodded, half a laugh, half a gulp. I will. The next day, the community gathered under a wide tent. The heat sat on their shoulders, but joy made it a light load. A ribbon waited for a pair of scissors. Children buzzed like bees. The first drumbeat called everyone to that moment where history makes a small mark you can visit later when days require courage. Amma stepped forward, indigo shawl over her shoulders. Kofi stood in the back again, smiling at the ground, like a man who knows better than to let his face boast. The luthier stood with his apprentice, their hands smelling of varnish and prayer. The youth leader grinned and wiped his forehead with the hanky he always kept like an old-fashioned gentleman. Felix stood near the side, not hiding, not demanding a camera. The kiosk owner's father sat in the front row with both hands on a cane and a face like a satisfied farmer. Amma lifted the mended guitar, that seam shining like a scar anyone would be proud to display. She sang the first line, and the tent breathed. She sang about a stranger who stopped in the rain and did not offer half-eaten pastry or shouts, but a different thing, eyes that did not look away. She sang about a girl who carried her mother's shawl like a flag she did not need to wave to claim a nation of hope. She sang about a man whose grief learned to build schools. She sang about a manager whose lesson arrived like a knock at the door and taught his hand to open instead of push. When the song ended, silence held it 1 second too long and then broke into hands clapping like rain again, the good kind. As the crowd dispersed and laughter flew off like birds, Amma felt something in her bag crinkle. She reached in and pulled out a folded note she had not put there. Her name was written on the front in neat, careful handwriting. Inside, a single sentence. There is one more thing you should know. Below it, a photocopy of an old document, crisper than the one from the storeroom. It contained the same initials. The date was earlier, the amount larger. The beneficiary line read, Healthcare Advance, M. The M was her mother's name, abbreviated. The hospital listed was the small clinic where her mother had taken her cough when the rainy season had crawled into her lungs and built a temporary house. Amma looked up, eyes moving over the tent, the faces, the mango trees, the stretch of sky. Kofi stood with his head bowed as he spoke to a boy about the best way to pack a drumskin for travel. He had not given her the note now. He had wanted the day to be about the community, about songs, about futures that do not require a particular man's name to open doors. But someone had slipped the note to her, someone who thought secrets should be grateful to be aired. Her heart softened further toward something that had not yet taken a shape she could name. In the evening, as the sun pulled the color out of the grass and handed it to the sky, Amma walked to where Kofi stood alone, for once, near the mango tree. She held up the note. He saw it and closed his eyes for half a breath. When he opened them, he did not pretend. I wanted to leave the past where it lay, he said. Not because I am ashamed of what I did, because I did not want it to do what it sometimes does, make present kindness look like interest with accrued profit. Amma nodded. But the past sometimes knocks kindly, she said. This was a kind knock. They stood in companionable quiet. The air held cricket songs and the sound of a child practicing a scale somewhere. After a while, Amma asked, light but serious, what would you do if you could choose only one? Keep helping quietly, or let people know so they can pressure others to help too. Kofi smiled at the corner of his mouth. That is the question that wakes me at 4, he said. I do not have one answer for all days. Some days require drums, some days require whispers, some days require a woman with an indigo shawl to decide. Amma looked at the shawl at her shoulders, fingers on the frayed edge. Then today I say we whisper and teach the children to drum, she said. Good, Kofi said. That sounds like a policy. They laughed, the kind of laugh that was not show, the kind that makes a night softer for the people who hear it from a few steps away and think, maybe my day will be gentle too. The road ahead wasn't clean. It never is. The channel would face days with low views. The fund would see months where the ledger frowned. The school would need paint again and again. The community would splinter along old lines and mend again like cloth stitched by hands that have done it too often to give up now. Felix would still have days where he felt the itch to raise his voice and would have to go drink water instead. Kofi would still wake some nights and feel the dust of a hospital corridor in his throat. He would still scroll too late through reports he could assign to someone else, and then, on better nights, set the phone face down and sit on a step outside and let the air teach him a different spreadsheet with stars for numbers. But a new system had been installed, quietly, like a well in a corner lot, voices feeding mouths, songs teaching spines to stand up, apologies making space for better mornings, and a shawl reminding its owner to carry her mother's warmth without burning her hands. Moral. True power is not the noise a man can make in public. It is the soft courage to do right when no one will clap. Riches that matter are not counted in currency, but in moments where someone's dignity is protected and their tomorrows made lighter. If you carry pain, turn it into practice. If you are given a platform, turn it into a bridge.